Hey everybody, Mazer here, and I have a new movie review for you. Today we're going to be talking about MidSommer, the newest film from Ari Aster, the guy who did Hereditary. And like the Child's Play movie before this, this is all improv. There's no script. It's just me going off the top of my head. So please forgive me if I ramble or anything. But we are here to discuss what I felt about this new horror film that just came out. As you all know, I'm a huge horror buff. And this is a different kind of horror movie, which I'm sure a lot of people were turned off about. But personally, for me, spoilers, I loved it! Okay, so the overall storyline, without getting into spoilers, I'm not going to tell you much about the actual overall plot of the film or a lot of the more spoilerific details because this is a movie you got to see on your own. All right. But yeah, the basic plot is a group of friends are led to a small town in the middle of nowhere in Sweden so they could research this little town's midsummer celebration. And while they are there, things start going, I wouldn't say wrong. Things get very unusual, very, let's say, unearthly, very ethereal almost. And basically, it's these teenagers, these college students, having to deal with this other culture, but bit by bit, things start going wrong, and they realize that they are in over their heads, basically. I know that's not the best description, but I really can't get deep into it without spoiling a lot, and I really don't want to do that. I know this sounds very generic the way I'm saying it, but it's not, and I promise you it's not. So, right off the bat, I loved almost everything about this film. I love the cinematography. I love the fact that it takes place all in the daylight. Everyone keeps mentioning that's all in daylight, and they're acting like this is this huge, amazing, genre-breaking idea, which is not as true. There are a lot of horror movies that take place during the day, but what sets this one apart, I think, is that there's no evil force hunting people down. In fact, this little village is very peaceful and cheerful and very welcoming and just overall very happy. There's it doesn't feel like a cult while still feeling like a cult. Like, I could understand how you can get a false sense of security while hanging out with these people. And at the same time, there's this underlying presence of there's something wrong here, but I don't know what. And then you have to wonder to yourself, is what I'm feeling because these guys are a different culture than I am? And I'm just not used to how they do things? Or is it something a lot more sinister that I'm not quite grasping? And that's the theme of the whole film. So, you know how you go on National Geographic or something and you're watching how these tribes in the Amazon or these other cultures like in Haiti and stuff, how they do these bizarre rituals that to them seem absolutely perfectly normal, but to us is completely barbaric and twisted. That's what this movie's about. It's about a bunch of outsiders seeing this celebration and not understanding if this is okay because it's their culture or if it's royally messed up because of what they are experiencing. Like I said, I can't get into that much detail without spoiling any of the great scenes. But the biggest part is this is not your traditional horror movie. I mentioned that before. And the reason that is this is not jump scare, jump scare, jump scare. No. This is not that kind of movie. This is a very nice, even film. If there's a story to it, actually kind of like underlying stories, because the movie follows primarily the main girl, which is a girl named Danny, who had a tragic occurrence happen in her life, and she's still dealing with it by going on this trip with her boyfriend Christian and his friends. And so we're seeing her coping with her tragedy in this little village while the other characters are exploring this new culture. And so we're getting the story of the village, the very small story of the other characters, like learning about the culture, and then the primary story, which is this girl, Danny, who is trying to overcome grief and loneliness. And she sees a lot of how the village handles things like this. And again, the village is very welcoming, they're very understanding. You know, everybody's very peaceful. They talk a lot about community and family, and it's very almost seductive to Danny, because these are things that she feels like she's missing in her life. So it's kind of played out like this little drama, but there's this whisper of foreboding and wickedness without being wicked. And it's just this, something's wrong. And that's what makes this movie so unsettling, is that you as the audience know there is something wrong. This village is peaceful and happy, but you just feel like there's this darkness to everything they're doing, even though you're not seeing it. It's just uncomfortable, you know? And, you know, like Hereditary, it's not very violent, but when you do get violent, it's, oh my God, it was like some wonderfully brutal moments, but they're very quick, and it's the perfect shock value. You know what I'm saying? The way they use silence in this movie and the music in this movie, this guy, this Astor, the director, he doesn't want to constantly do loud bang, kitty cat jumping out of a cabinet, people sneaking up behind each other. No, he just wants to shock you with visuals and subtlety. And then when he gets to something violent, it is violent. It's brutal. It's horrific. And he does a good job at showing you the graphic nature of what you're seeing, and it's wonderfully done. But he used it sparingly, and I love that because it keeps that shock value. You show so much violence in your movie, you're going to get desensitized. It's going to get boring. You use it sparingly, like this guy did, and every time you see it, you're just like, oh, shoot, that just happened. Oh, you know what I'm saying? Oh, man. One of the biggest things that I took away from this film, and this doesn't happen often with horror films, is that I remembered every main character's name. All right, usually in horror films, I have a very hard time remembering characters' names. I usually say, oh, it was this girl, blonde girl, brunette girl, dumb guy, silly guy. That's how I classify people in almost every horror film. Unless it's like one or two primary main characters, like in Child's Play, has how it's it's Andy. Okay, so I just remember Andy's name. Scratch that. But it's like, okay, for example, Saw. I know Jigsaw, I know Amanda, I know Dr. Gordon, I know that characters. But that's something you learn over 7 movies. For these like one movie deals, it's hard for me to remember characters' names. But I loved these characters. Even like the one character, who I'm not going to tell you who, you're supposed to hate. I loved him because I hated him so much. God, he was just the biggest prick in the whole film. But I remember them. You got freaking Danny and Christian and Josh and Pele and Mark, Connie and Simon. That's like, holy crap, I actually remembered the main cast of characters, which is rare. But each one stood out on their own. Just enough where it's like, I want to know what happens to Josh. I want to know what happens to Mark. I want to know what happens to Christian. And each one had a very distinct personality, and they were not separated by the nerd or the geek. Each one had their own little traits, and that was just, it's unusual for me, and that tells you how well made this movie was. These weren't stereotypes waiting for the butcher block. These were real characters who I got invested in to the point where I remembered each one of them. And I'm very thankful for that, and I'm very glad for that, because when things happen, it's a much more emotional impact. Let's see. Can't again. I'm trying to avoid spoilers here. This is a great movie of an idea of, like I said, different cultures. And unlike Hereditary, I would even go as far as saying I don't feel like there's an evil presence in this film. Hereditary had an evil presence. You had this cult, and they were manipulating people and planning the resurrection of a demon and all this jazz. In this one, I don't feel like these are not good people. And I'm not going to say that they're good people, but I don't feel that they are inherently evil, if you get what I mean. It's like if you were raised with this village, you would not see evil. Hereditary, they knew they were evil. In this village, it's just their culture. They're just doing what their ancestors have been doing for hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of years. So to them, it's just tradition. To outsiders, it's brutality. So they make it makes an interesting antagonist, because you kind of go back and forth. It's like, were they evil or was it a different culture? They do bad things. I'm not saying what they did was not bad. It's the idea of good versus evil. That's one of the big things of horror. And I love that. Now, unfortunately, the audience I went with did not feel the same way. I'm sorry, not went with. The audience around me did not feel the same way. I heard a lot of people saying, as they left the theater, how bad the movie was. I heard people groaning in disappointment. One guy in the theater yelled, "That's it," when the credits rolled, and that disappointed me. But I understand why, and that is because this is not a traditional horror film. If you've seen Hereditary, you know what Aster is all about. But if you haven't seen Hereditary, you'll go into this thinking, oh my God, this movie's getting tons of praise. They're saying it's super creepy, super scary. I can't wait to see it. And you're given this, a very... All right, so let me put it this way. Horror films are like this. All right? You go spike, 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 jump scare, jump scare, jump scare, suspense, jump scare, and then it always rises to this big climax where it's usually good versus evil, a big battle of some kind, a battle of wills, like in Conjuring 2 when the woman's going against the demon, the nun, and the wind and screaming and all lightning and MidSommer's not like that. MidSommer is very even throughout. It's a slow burn without being boring, because if you know what you're getting yourself into, you're just like watching. At least this is what I was doing. I was watching everything in the background. I'm like, okay, what does that mean? Oh, I saw that. What does that mean? Is this going to be reference? Is this foreshadowing? Is that foreshadowing? Is this foreshadowing? And a lot of it was, and that was the beauty of it. But I could see how the average horror fan, not horror fan, but average person expecting from a horror film would be disappointed. It's a slow burn. It's a story. People are describing it as a fairy tale even. So do not go into this movie expecting jump scares after jump scares. Okay, that's not what this is about. This is telling you a story. Okay? And it does that very effectively. Hereditary, which I did love, I found it very unsettling. I felt the ending kind of fell flat, to be honest, in Hereditary. This one, and I was worried that this one would end flat for me as well, because lots of these more artistic, slow burn horror films, I feel like the endings are not as satisfying. But this one nailed it. Wonderful. I was enraptured from start to finish. It was just a great experience for me. That said, it's not for everybody. All right, just a heads up. All right, you see that little thing I put in the corner? You got my poster of MidSommer. You see that little symbol in the corner right there, A24. They're not your like traditional production studio. Okay, when you see an A24 logo, you're going to be in for something very different. All right. They don't do like slasher films. They don't do monster movies like a Godzilla chasing you or raptors hunting you down. They do very different, almost artistic, but unique style of films, especially their horror movies. So don't go into Midsummer thinking that you will be absolutely terrified by jump scares and loud noises. This is more unsettling because, like I said, everything's happy, everything's cheerful, everyone's perky, but you, as the audience, knows there's something wrong. And it's a fun game trying to determine what's going to happen next before it happens. So, let's see. Anything else about the film? Again, great cinematography, great music. Oh, I wanted to bring this up. So, again, I have to bring up Hereditary. Ari Aster does something in horror films that I feel like does not get represented well, and that's his use. We already talked about the violence, so we're going to talk about the other side of the spectrum, which is nudity. Um, he does nudity, because there is nudity in this film, very uniquely in his horror films, whereas it's not, TNA for the sake of titillating the audience. It's when you see women and men. I'm going to give this to this. There's full frontal male nudity, which is something you almost never see in movies. And I give huge props to that, to be completely honest, because a lot of studios are always afraid of showing that. It's like, you can show all this, but you can't show all this. It's like, again, it all boils down to when you actually see these characters like bare naked, it's disturbing. It's wrong. They're not doing anything but standing there, and you're bothered by it because it's not natural, the situation at hand. I heard some people going, hee hee, ooh, hee, oh, naked, naked. But then the audience got really quiet because they're like, oh, it's naked. And then you're like, oh, this is not sexy. It's not even natural. It's kind of, everything I'm seeing is very unnatural. And it just makes you uncomfortable in a good way because it builds that unsettling moment. There are some funny moments in the movie. One involving that nudity scene, and you got to see it to believe it. It's funny because you're just putting yourself in the situation, and you're like, what? But again, it's still disturbing at the same time. A lot of the humor comes from a character called named Mark, who is kind of he's not there for education. He's there to meet women and party. He's the party guy. He has a lot of good lines, and I would say overall, it's a very serious film, and I appreciate that very much. Yeah, so I cannot recommend this enough, but at the same time, I want to let you know that this is not for everyone. You know, Ari Aster films are not really for everyone. If you want jump scares and violence and slasher films, this is not your film. All right. If you want atmosphere, suspense, and just feeling uncomfortable, this is more up your alley. Okay, it's a slow burn with a great storyline and a great theme of what it takes to be friends and family and togetherness. There's a lot of great themes in this film, and I think you'll all really enjoy it if you go in with an open mind. So there you go. I give it, 2 thumbs up, 5 skulls, 10 stars, whatever you guys want to call it. A plus plus. Whatever people are using these days to rate movies. The fact is, I enjoyed it quite a bit. I would love to go into more details about certain moments in the movie, but I can't without offering. I don't want to spoil even the smallest bit of this film to you. All right, I want you to know what the overall concept is, that the way it was shot, the way it was edited, the way it was, the music was composed. That's what I want to share with you. I don't want to share how anything goes down, because that is for you to experience. You get what I'm saying? Anyways, so there you go, my little discussion, my little rant on MidSommer. I hope you guys do enjoy it. If you did see the movie, please leave a comment in the comments below. I read everything, even though they tell you not to. And if you did not like the movie, also comment. I like hearing different opinions, you know what I'm saying? So thank you guys for joining me today. I am Mazer, and I'll see you next time. Bye.